It's great to have you here, to be with you and with your incredible community. I'm just a huge fan of the Grown and Flown community and really thank both you and Mary Dell and the whole community for their support. This book is kind of a personal passion of mine because I think that after talking about who gets in and why for the last couple of years, and in many ways they're companion books, I really want to give parents permission to think more broadly about what makes a good college, because we know there are more than 25 good colleges out there. The quality of higher education is not reserved just for the top 25 in any rankings. So I want to give them permission to think more broadly about what makes a good college and then the tools to figure out what is the dream college for their kid or their kid's dream college. That's what this is really about, because I know after being in and around higher ed for more than 25 years, that something is wrong right now, that we are too focused on elite higher education, and that there's great opportunities at many, many more places. And that's what I'm
Fantastic.
hoping to do with this book.
Eden has already jumped into the comments and said, I pre-order the book. So for anybody who wants to pre-order the book, Mary Dell will put the link to everybody in the web chat. And I should have started off by saying, if you have questions for Jeff, we are going to do Q&A and just put your questions in the chat. Somebody's raising their hand. You don't have to raise your hand, just put your questions in the chat and we will get to your questions. But thank you, Eden, for starting us off by pre-ordering the book. Jeff, one of the first and most powerful things you talk about in the book is teaching and good teaching and how a student finds a college that provides that. Can you give us a little background on that since it's so important?
Yeah, so it is so important. It's something that we don't really look at. So one of the things that we don't look at when we go to a campus is what is the curriculum that you're actually going to be taking as in any major. So on many campuses, you're actually going to be in a core curriculum in many cases. Sometimes that might be your entire first year of college. Who teaches those courses? Is it full-time faculty? Is it part-time faculty? Are they graduate students? How big are those courses? Are they all 300 person courses or more where you're going to be sitting in the back and not really getting to know the professor? Does the professor come to class early? Do they stay late? That's one of the things I notice when I'm on campuses. It's very hard, by the way, as a prospective student to actually go see a class. It's something that I always encourage people to ask for if they're going to visit a campus. I did that, by the way, a couple of years ago on Instagram, Lisa, and I literally had a VP for enrollment say, "Don't recommend that." And I said, "Why not?" And they said, "Well, because we're going to be inundated with those requests, and we don't like that." Well, you're the consumer. So you should be asking these questions. I really want to know is how much interaction are faculty having with first year students? Are they, what is, to the very least, you could walk down the hallway where professors have offices, see where their office hours are, see if they're in there. Maybe even as a prospective student, knock if they're not busy and see what's up. Because the thing that we know from all the research, especially now in these first couple of weeks of the fall semester. I see this in your groups. I see this in a lot of parent groups right now of parents saying, my kid just called from college. It's week one. They hate it. They want to transfer. They want to come home, right? They've only been there for a couple of days. What should we do? Well, you can find this sense of belonging, during the college search. And a lot of this is those connections with professors. Professors aren't going to be the only mentors. They're not going to be the only people that care about you. But in those first couple of weeks of college, beyond your peers, beyond who you're going to meet in your residence hall, and maybe in clubs, they are going to be your immediate connection to college. And so I want to know who they are. And I think that's the question that you should be asking on the college tour. Ask the students in your major, ask the tour guide about their favorite professors, see if they could talk about those professors that changed their lives, because I know that many of us could talk about that, about our own college experience. That's the question you should be asking around faculty in particular.
Are there places we can look for any data or information around that parents and students should be studying?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot. And that's the problem. So one of the things you can look for are average class sizes, not the entire, so most colleges will tout their student faculty ratio, and it's always going to be like, 8 to 1 or 10 to 1 or 12 to 1. don't pay any attention to that because that's college wide. It really differs by major, by school within a college. So you're a university. So you want to ask, what is the ratio for this school or my major? How many courses am I going to have my freshman year with more than 20 or 30 students? Small classes, big classes. I don't get too caught up in classes because a lot of it is about the professor. So you always want to ask the tour guide or other people that you meet, other students, to talk about, who their professors were, what did they like about them, what did they dislike about them. But that class size is important because if you get a small class at some point during your first year, you can't hide in those places. It's impossible to hide in those places, and it's much easier to hide in a 300 course, a 300 student course. And so asking that question about the data is critically important. One other thing about a little bit about teaching, but more about your major. You also want to ask, how many students graduate in my major every year? And the reason why, Lisa, I want to recommend that, because it also gives you a sense of the size of the department that you're going to be majoring in. And so if they have 20 students a year, times four, for your, 4 years of college, you get a sense of the size of the department. And why is that important? Because most students, I just had an item in my newsletter a couple of weeks ago about this. Essentially, 80% of students major in like 10% of the majors on campus. So 90% of the majors are essentially under enrolled. And why that's important now is we just saw this happen in Indiana. We're seeing this in a bunch of states at public universities where they're saying you have to cut under enrolled majors. So you may end up at a place where if it's not a big enough major, they're going to kind of cheat on the faculty. So you might get stuck with a lot of part-timers, a lot of adjuncts. Nothing bad about adjuncts because there could be some very good industry-based adjuncts. You could get a lot of graduate students, and that may be a major that may not last. So you really want to go to a place where the major has a sizable number of students to make it a going concern.
Let's touch on something for a moment that you discuss a lot in the book, and that is how important it is to find a school where you're going to get connected to those important internships, which become ever more important, and later jobs. How do students and parents assess how good a college is at helping them in that process?
Well, one of the things you want to look at two options here. One is around internships, co-ops. I'm going to kind of group them all together.
Yep.
Internships, co-ops, other long project-based learning. First, you want to see, is it part of the curriculum in my major? If they add it into the requirements, that means it matters to the institution. Now, just because it's in the curriculum and it's a requirement, I met somebody recently whose daughter is at Clemson in the business school. They have a requirement in their major for an internship, and he was telling me that this father was telling me that they didn't get any help in actually getting the internship. So the second question you want to ask is, how much help does the department, do faculty and others help you in getting those internships? So the first thing you're looking for are requirements. If it's a requirement, it matters more to the institution. But even if it's a requirement, how much help are they going to give you? If you have neither, if it's not as part of the curriculum, you're going to be kind of probably on your own. So then you want to ask at the Career Center, you want to ask in your department, where have students interned the last couple of years? When do they intern? That's another key question, Lisa, because as I point out in the book, a lot of this now is additive. In other words, you probably are not going to be able to get an internship between your first year and second year. You might be able to get one between your second and third, but that one between your third and fourth, absolutely critical because 80% of full-time hires now at Fortune 500 companies come from those internships, particularly between that summer, between junior and senior year. Sometimes it obviously happens during the year as well. And so those internships lead to jobs. But to get those internships junior to senior year, often you have to kind of get into the runway into them, and that starts earlier in college.
Thanks. I should have mentioned something earlier. My apologies, everyone. You will be sent the recording tomorrow. I can see people are asking that question. Um, Jeff, you mentioned something earlier on about belonging and getting a sense of belonging in a college. You know, students often go, they do a visit for an hour or two, and that's really their exposure to university. How do they know whether they're going to have a sense of belonging, and how do they know whether that's important to the college that they cultivate that sense of belonging with their students?
So, how do you know it's important to the college? One of the things I'm looking for often are first year experiences. We often talk in admissions around orientation, right? Most of us who went to college, 30 years ago, probably went through a orientation program for a couple of days before school started, and that was kind of it. Now, the thing really at most colleges, many of the dreams, the schools that I list in the Dream School book have very structured first year programs. Now, these all look a little different, but what they're trying to do is put students in kind of a cohort based experience so that you get to know other students who may have similar interests. That also puts you in front of a similar faculty member, the same faculty member, every week. Furman has an experience like this, as does St. Olaf, which are, by the way, two of the dream schools of the 75 listed in the book. These are very structured programs. And what it does is it puts you in a small group of students that have similar interests. It puts you in front of a full-time faculty member who may not be your advisor and is most likely not your advisor. So you get to know another faculty member. And it's very structured, meaning where orientation often just throws a lot of information at you, it helps you kind of move into that first year of college in a much slower way and really understand what you need to do. What are the clubs and activities you want to join? What are the internships you want to do? How do you really understand what a major is and what you want to major in if you haven't declared one yet? There's all these things that happen over a longer period of time as part of these first year experiences. And most of these are labeled in that way. There's even a big conference in higher ed called FYE, first year experiences. And now, by the way, many colleges are adding a second year, a sophomore year experience to structure these a little bit. And I talk about this in the book, Lisa, as a kind of scaffolding around the beginning of college. And I know that many parents out there will be like, well, I just kind of want to let my kids sink or swim. If you remember back in the day when we all went to college, the professor would say, look to your right, look to your left. One of you won't be around here in the spring. That's not really the kind of going mindset anymore in colleges and universities. They really are there to try to help support you in that transition, especially from high school to college. So you want to look for you want to look for schools that have these programs that structure particularly that first year, maybe even that second year, and then slowly they take that away, moving into your junior and senior year as you move into the workforce. And by the way, that's a sign of a good college, not a college that wants to hold your hand. That's a college that wants to help you succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, You've mentioned a couple of times the list at the back of the book. I just want to remind everybody we're talking about Dream School. It's out September 9th. This list, which is not a list like you'd find in a magazine, the explanation is 50 pages long. I
I'm
looked.
sorry about
It's
that.
okay. No, it's you don't just label these schools and name them. You explain why these are colleges that give kids such a great experience and have admissions rates that are more manageable than some of
And
the.
that is, Lisa, that is the key.
Yeah.
Admissions rates that are manageable. I mean, we have all the rankings out there. I know this is ranking season, so every week, LinkedIn had theirs, and Forbes will be coming out with theirs. The granddaddy of them all, U.S. News will be coming out in a couple of weeks. And once in a while, you'll see surprises on them. Babson was in the top 10, I know, for LinkedIn's rankings that came out a couple of weeks ago. But if you look at the top 10 of most of these, they're all the same schools. I could tell you exactly what's going to be in the top 10 of most of these. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Chicago, go down the name. And you want to know what they all have in common? They all have acceptance rates that are single digits. So, I mean, it's great. These are great schools. I'm not saying they're not great schools, but if you say, well, these are the best schools, here are the top 10, top 15, you can't get into any of them. So how is that list that helpful? So what we did with our list is the first filter that we used was selectivity. So we did not include any schools on our list that accept fewer than 20% of students. Most of them accept more than, these are obviously numbers that change from year to year. Most of them accept 25% or more. Most of them accept 50, 60% or more in some cases. And then we looked at we also mixed up the list to make sure that there was, or balanced the list to make sure that there were 60% of them are public colleges and universities, because 60% of American students go to public colleges and universities. So we wanted to make sure they were well represented. And then we did a balanced by geography. Because here's the other thing. Probably many people on this call think, well, my kids will go away to college, but the average student in the US goes to college within 50, on average, 50 miles of home. So we think of this idea of going away to college. Yeah, and a lot of kids do. They go many states away. Many kids go to college in their own state. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a list that was representative geographically of the US as well.
Deanna's going to ask a quick question, and I want to jump on it now because did you take affordability into account when you created this list?
We did.
In
So,
the back of the book?
let me run through the how we put the list together very quickly. I'm not going to go through all 50 pages, as you said. So the first thing we did was look at selectivity. So how to be, 20% or above. Most of them again are 25% or above. Then we looked at schools that were above 1,000 students. Why that threshold? 40% of the US market is under 1,000 students. We have a lot of tiny colleges out there. I think many of them are not going to survive. They're going to have to merge. Some of them will go out of business. Some of them will be acquired. We've been seeing that already. I didn't want to put schools that were financially vulnerable on the list. So they have at least 1,000 students. We did look at affordability, and here's how we did it. We looked at what we put together was something called a price to earnings ratio. How much are you going to pay? And it's net price, by the way. So that includes merit aid. On average, what's the net price that you're going to pay for this college? And then what's the outcome? What's the earnings outcome? Because you could go to a very expensive college, have to pay full price, and the outcome might be great. But by the way, you could go down a school down the street. The outcome could be pretty similar, and you will pay half the price. So why not take that into consideration? So the price to earnings ratio. We also looked at schools that kind of punched above their weight in terms of those outcomes, graduation rates and earnings. And what does that mean? Punch above their weight. We were able to look at the students they're bringing in the door. It's really easy to be Harvard and bring in the best and brightest and turn out those students to work at McKinsey and Goldman Sachs and Facebook or Meta. But what if you take students who come from a variety of different academic and socioeconomic backgrounds and you turn them into these great students who go into great jobs? You're punching above your weight, and we took that into account as well. And then finally, we worked with Burning Glass, and which looks at where students go to get jobs after college. And we wanted to look at places, at colleges that had a variety of outcomes. Meaning, if you look at a lot of these lists, I mentioned Babson earlier, great school. But the reason why Babson's outcomes are so great, it's a business school. Most of those students are going to work, in banks and other big businesses. And a lot of schools, MIT does well. Why does MIT do well? A lot of STEM graduates. So it's easier for schools that have a lot of STEM and business majors to do better in these outcomes-based rankings, because most of their students are going into high-paying careers. So we wanted to look at schools that had a variety of outcomes in terms of their students.
For whatever different courses the kids might have studied.
Exactly, right. Because I was a humanity. There's nothing wrong with being a humanities major.
I have a couple of admissions questions I want to get into with Jeff, but before we do, I just want you to tell everyone, you can pre-order the book. Maridale's put the link in, and that is the only way to get the list, I believe.
No, the list is in the book.
Exactly.
You will not get the list, but what you will get is
you'll get the list when you get the book.
You'll get the list when you get the book. Yeah, you're right.
What else will you get at the pre-order?
Yes. The only way to get the list is to get the book. And you will also get this. By the way, this is a physical copy. You will not get a physical copy of this, but you're going to get this 18-page guide that we've put together to help you put the lessons of the book in place while you're reading it. And the thing about this guide is we have no plans to offer this after the book comes out. We might offer it for a couple days after the book comes out, but we are not going to offer this as something that comes along with the book. So the only way you could get it is to pre-order the book now. And most important, go to my website and fill out, there's a form on that Dream School page to show your proof of purchase. And that's how you'll get this guide as well as access to a lot of other goodies that we're giving out. And all you have to
Kate,
do is pre-order the book.
Kate, who already has the guide, is telling everyone it's amazing. She's got
Oh,
it.
well, thank you.
Um,
No, and there's no hard copy of this. This guide is a PDF, so you will get a download of it. And by the way, as somebody asked, it could be the audiobook. It could be the ebook. By the way, if you order the audiobook, unfortunately, you're going to have to listen to me for 9 hours. So, because I recorded the audiobook, that you may not want to, but we'll let people decide that.
let's shift into a couple of questions that really impact on admissions and have been things that have been changing a lot in the last couple of years. One of them is early action and early decision. And I think this confuses families a lot because it has changed so much and become such a big piece of admissions and such a large part of the student body. Can we talk about that a bit and what you've seen?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm just putting in another link to, once they pre-order the
Yep.
book. So early action and early decision. And I don't want to assume everybody on the call tonight is deeply steeped in those terms. So let me just quickly describe the differences. Early decision, usually put in an application to a school before November 1 or earlier. You get a decision usually in December. And there's usually multiple rounds of these if you want to do that, early decision one, early decision two. But the important thing is it's binding. So if you get in, you're going there and you withdraw your applications from other schools. Early action is you apply early. And I'll explain that in a minute, get some sort of decision back. But you don't have to make a decision to enroll until later on in the year, usually by May 1. Both early action and early decision, but especially early action and especially at the big publics, are on the rise since the pandemic. And why is that? Because there are just many more students applying to, or there's same number of students, but they're applying to more schools. And schools want to have more certainty, and early action, even though it's not binding, gives them a little bit more certainty on what their applicant pool looks like because they have to get these applications in early. It allows them to get students into their systems to understand, well, how committed are they to coming here, things like that. So combined, early action and early decision, the number of applications filed that way almost now equal regular decision, according to the Common App. That's how many early applications are being filed. But let me tell you about a few of the other trends related to that. One is something that's been happening for 10 plus years now. Early decision for those schools who use it, again, early decision being binding, taking up more and more of the class. And I'm talking 50, 60, 70. In some small liberal arts colleges, like 70+% of the freshman class, they're locking in that way. So in other words, if you don't apply early decision, there's not a lot of spots left in regular decision. And that's really critical for people to know. Second, on early action, one of the things that we've been seeing the last couple of years is they're inundated with applications early action. And what ends up happening is instead of getting a yes or a no, because by the way, when you're applying early, that's what you want to know, you're getting a deferral. You're being moved to the regular decision pool. So you're getting essentially no answer. And the worst case here, by the way, that I know some schools are doing is you apply early action, you get deferred to regular decision, and then in regular decision, you get put on the wait list. I mean, they just keep stringing you along. And what we saw this year on the wait list is a couple of the very selective schools, Duke, Columbia, Harvard, they kept their wait lists open most of the summer because usually at some point they'll just say, wait list is over, move on. Go, you're not getting in here, go somewhere else. And that's what Duke did. And then they reopened it. They called up 50 people or more than 50 people. They ended up enrolling 50 people. And they said, oh, by the way, you're going to get off the wait list. It's the end of July. And by that time, most of these kids, in fact, I would bet all of these kids were committed somewhere else. They probably had orientation. They probably had a class schedule. Oh, by the way, they had a roommate. And they probably already paid a bill. And now Duke's calling them up and saying in 24 hours, you have to decide if you want to come here. This is the system we're operating under. And I really wish everyone out there listening tonight has the power to not participate in this or to participate in it in a different way, to start saying no to these things, because that's the only way. Everybody always asks me, well, how is admissions going to change? not going to change by the colleges. They're all going to react to the parent market. And my hope with this book, Lisa, is that we stop you know, going crazy over the top 25 schools and we start looking at more schools. And you know what? The top 25, maybe they won't change, but if they start seeing changes in the marketplace, trust me, they will.
Right. Can we touch on one other thing that's changed a lot over the last couple of years, well, particularly over the last 5 years, which is testing, ACT and SAT testing. Schools all went test optional, then some of them moved back to test required, then some of them moved back to test suggested. This is leaving parents and students very confused. How should parents and students think about testing in this environment?
Yeah, Lisa, if you mind, I see two questions just right on
Yeah.
my screen
Go
here. I'm
ahead,
going to
jump.
quickly take them. Somebody
Yeah.
asked about early enrolling. Rolling admissions is different. Rolling is you apply, you find out. They basically are admitting students as they apply. Many schools will take an application, they'll read it, and they'll send out acceptances or deferrals or denials all at the same time. Rolling is they're basically accepting students or denying them as they come in. Somebody also asked about the declining birth rates impacting college admissions. I just did an excerpt from the book for New York Magazine that will be coming out in a couple weeks on this. There's a lot of incorrect information, by the way, out on the internet right now. And I think everybody says, well, because of the demographic cliff, it's going to be easier to get into college. First of all, it's easy to get into most colleges. Average acceptance rate across the US is 65%. Most colleges take most students, so it's already easy. Will those colleges get even easier? Sure, because there's going to be fewer seniors applying. I think this question is mostly geared at will it be easier to get into those highly selective colleges? And the answer is no. These are single digit acceptance rates. Will they maybe move up to from 8% to 10%, maybe to 12%? Yes. But they're not going to suddenly move to 50% from 12%. So not going to change anything. You asked about testing. Most schools are still test optional, but testing has really come back. If you look at not only the volume of testing, but if you look at who is sending test scores with the Common App, that has come up over the last year. And what we're finding is, and my advice, take the test so you have a score. Because if you have a score, you then have agency to decide what to do with it. And I think that's critical. Having that agency to say, yes, I'm going to submit it, I'm not going to submit it. These are questions you should be talking to your high school counselor about or your counselors about. But then you have that score to make that decision. And I think there's a lot of great advice out there in terms of where does that score place you in the overall score matrix for that college. And most colleges, by the way, their average scores have gone up because only the good students with good scores are applying or being accepted. But what I really want folks to remember here is talk to your counselor, make a decision about sending a score or not. But at the end of the day, don't second guess that when a decision does come back. I think what ends up happening is that parents really tear their hair out about this and they want to know when they don't get in, they'll say, oh, we should have sent a score. Or we get in and then they tell everybody else, well, we sent a score. That's why we got in. And Lisa, I just want to end with this quote because it's a quote that I'll never forget. Stu Schmill, who's the fantastic dean of admissions at MIT, just one of the most fantastic people I've ever met in my life, who's in the book. Um, he had friends in his neighborhood, because they know he's the dean of admissions at MIT, and they're asking him, my kid's applying to X school, should we submit scores? And he said, I have no idea. Like he said, I just can't tell them. I have no idea. And by the way, he works in admissions.
Right. And a long time. He's
Yeah.
one of the things you touched on in the book, I thought was really interesting and important, but it was that students should try and figure out what they want to do and explore colleges based on a particular interest. You urge them to, know what they're looking for and seek out the colleges that have those things that they're looking for. You mentioned it about majors earlier. So many high school students have no idea what they want to do. They truly are undecided. How does a student who's truly undecided approach the college admissions process and making a list?
So I think part of this is what kind of school do they want? And I think that's probably the most important thing, even if they know what they want to major in. Do we want a large public, right? So we were just on vacation out in the Pacific Northwest. I have a rising sophomore. in high school, and we went walked around the University of Washington, and my sophomore said, "Oh, she's been to Penn State before. We live near the University of Maryland." They all these big public flagships. I know I'll probably get a ton of comments in the chat. At the end of the day, one public flagship similar to another public flagship. I'll be honest with you. I've been on a lot of these. Yes, there are small, I get there are differences, but it gives you a sense of what a big public flagship is. Within a couple hours of my home here, we could go up to Dickinson, Franklin and Marshall, Lafayette, and see what a small liberal arts college looks like, in a more rural area. I could go downtown here in DC and see what an urban private, like a George Washington or a Georgetown, is like. That's really the first thing you want to do. Do you want big? Do you want small? Do you want far from home? Do you want a small liberal arts college? Do you want more of a big research university with graduate students and big time sports? Those are the first questions to ask, whether you know your major or not. Now, if you don't know your major, but you have a couple of ideas in mind, then that's where you really want to take a deeper dive on not only the majors available, but the major requirements, particularly around admissions. Because at some schools, very popular majors are really capacity controlled, and it's really hard to get into those majors as transferring into those majors after your freshman year. Um, the other thing you want to look for are schools that have structured programs for undecided students. Those could be exploratory programs. They're called by a bunch of different names, but that's one of the things to look for are schools that have structured programs for students who don't have a major. By the way, this is where liberal arts colleges shine. Because at many liberal arts colleges, you do not need to declare a major right off the bat, as you do at some other colleges and universities. You could explore a little bit more, which is great, and have that cross-disciplinary way of thinking. And then finally, not a lot of schools do this, but Georgia State I know does this, and a couple of others. They have something called meta majors, where they're very broad umbrellas. So think business rather than accounting or marketing. So you have very broad majors that allows you to explore a bigger topic area. And by the way, the nice thing about those is that many of those classes that you'd be taking then count toward your actual major once you declare
Perfect. We have so many questions pouring in. We're going to jump right to our viewers' questions. I'm an American zooming in from Hong Kong. I don't know what time it is there, but thank you for joining us.
Probably in the morning, I would imagine, right? Yeah.
Here's my question. Parents are on board with your message. We don't want our children to be focused on elite higher education, obsessed with getting in. But at school, students are obsessed with rankings and getting into the top 25. How can we transform this way of thinking by our students?
Well, I think it has to start at home. And by the way, it definitely happens in the cacophony of discussions around us. So I did a survey for the book, 3,000 plus parents, and probably some of the parents maybe on this call might have responded to it. And we asked them how much prestige matters to them. Parents, 16% said it's incredibly important. And then we said, how much does it matter to your kids? And they said 28% of kids or parents said it matters to our kids. Then we said, how much does it matter to other people in your community? Prestige, 60+%. It was all around like your community and what your community thinks, right? That sticker you're going to put on the back of your window of your car, the Instagram pages that every high school has to advertise where their kids are going, the thing I hate. And I know it happens, and I know most schools don't do it themselves. I know the students are doing it. That stuff is a signaling mechanism. And I wish that, as I say in the book, I'm probably going to date myself, but the old college shirt that John Belushi wore in Animal House, it just said college. And I just wish that that's what we would be advertising. Hey, my kid's going to college. Not, I don't, it doesn't really matter which one. They're going to college. And that's what matters at the end of the day. It's again, I think this is up to us. I get it. And I think the best way to try to push back against this is not to talk incessantly about it. Not to, advertise on your Facebook page where your kids are applying, where they're visiting, not to tell everybody, oh, we're going to visit these 5 schools, not to talk about where you're applying. Like, I don't know what it was like, Lisa, when you were applying to college, but like we didn't talk about it as much as we do now. We didn't share as much as we do now. I think we just overshare about this, and that raises the temperature as a result. So it starts again, I hate to put the blame on us, but it is us, right?
It also helps if you read the book, and I don't mean to be glib about that because the book explains a lot about why the outcomes at a lot of colleges are excellent. And honestly, I've read this. It's not beyond the reading of a high school student, also. So I don't think it would harm your student to give your student bits of the book to read, to think about other colleges and read that list at the end. And just sometimes I think kids don't think about these other colleges because they don't know a lot about them either. They
No,
haven't
and I
had
and
some in
I
their
trust me.
accomplishment.
Yeah, and Lisa, one of the reasons I wrote this book, and one of the reasons why I named names, and our mutual friend Allison Slater Tate, I think, is on this call tonight, and she knows how much I've stressed over this list of dream schools at the end of the book. The reason I ended up naming names was because I've been in and around this industry for 25 years. I kind of understand it in a way. I understand who's who and what is what in terms of colleges and universities. I know most people are entering this maybe for the first time, maybe for the second or third time, but it might be the first time since they went to college. And the world of higher education, we're talking thousands of colleges and universities out there, all of whom, by the way, say they're the greatest. I get it, right? The rankings put them in some sort of order and they make sense. So I understand why we run to the rankings and we look at the top 25 or we go to Naviance. By the way, that's another thing that I think is wrong in this system. Most students go to schools that use Naviance or Score or some other sort of counseling software that does these scattergrams that tell you kind of other students at your high school around, and where they applied and whether they got in or not. There have been a couple of academic studies on these that show that it forces students to just apply to the same schools over and over again because that's what they're seeing in these systems. And so it really, I know it takes courage to break out a little bit, but that's what I want you to do. And I hope that I give you the tools to start to discover some other schools. There's an example in the book, Lisa, of a counselor that works at a school in LA where he has his seniors research colleges and universities, and they can't look at any of the colleges that any of the students at that school went to the previous year. So they have to look for new schools. The other thing that they do is when they present this to their peers and later on to their parents, they talk about the school, but without naming it. So they say this school offers X and Y, and they talk about all the attributes. And then at the end, they do a reveal. And students are like, oh, yeah, I really want to go to that school. And then they reveal the name, and then, oh, no, I'm not going to go there now because it's all about the name.
Right. One parent's asking, would this book be helpful for an average student? Their student has about a 3.0 grade point average. Does the book speak to students like that?
As I say in the introduction, I was that student, right? I'm proud of it. I was a solid B student in high school. I was a late bloomer in college. I went to a place that really saw me and did a wonderful job that I love, Ithaca College. And a lot of the places in this book, first of all, a lot of the examples of students are all over the place in terms of their SAT scores, in terms of their high school grades, and in terms of where they end up. But the list at the back, again, as I said earlier on, it's accessible. These are places that some of them accept 25% or 30% of students, some of them accept 60 or 70% of students. So there are plenty of examples in this book for that average student.
Somebody's asking, do the percentages that we discussed on early action, early decision apply to colleges not ranked in the top 50th? Marydale will put a link in the chat right now to where you can find the ED and EA rates for hundreds and hundreds of colleges. Somebody we work with compiled them all, and you can look there. So that'll be easier than Jeff trying to put this together in a conversation. Small liberal arts colleges, are those the best places to have a sense of belonging?
Size doesn't matter as much. You could find a sense of belonging on a big campus. I think if you go to a bigger campus, you have to find a way to make it smaller. So that could include, a number, so one of the dream schools is Michigan State. They have neighborhoods that they've really focused on and how they think about their learning, living communities at Michigan State. What does that do? It takes a big place, makes it feel smaller within your residential community. Sports does that, as does clubs. your major, right? So you just have to find a way at a bigger place to make the big place feel small. Some students are going to thrive at bigger places, right? They need that size. So it's not necessarily a bad thing for a sense of belonging. You might just have to try a little bit harder.
A couple of parents are asking about visiting colleges, how important it is. Do students need to visit every place they're going to apply? Some students are applying to 12 colleges. Their family budget doesn't stretch to that. What do you think about visiting colleges?
I think you can visit colleges at any point in the process. You do not have to visit it before you apply or even after you apply. My only suggestion is visit at some point, right? You do not want to put a deposit down on a place that you have not visited. I think it's really important to do that. And in fact, most campus visits, we have national data on this, happen in April. So most of the visits are happening after students have been accepted during those yield events in April when students are making a decision. So that's it's a good time to visit. You do not have to do it when you're applying.
Can you talk about some of the factors a student might want to consider when applying ED? Is this, what do you think about when you're the parents describing as shooting your shot? And what about schools that are offering ED for the first time? Should those be considered any differently?
Um, the last part of that question, I don't know. It's a good question. Anybody in the chat, I would love to hear their perspectives on that. I don't know if I have a specific answer on the first timers, the first time institutions offering ED. I'm assuming, by the way, they're probably talking about Michigan because Michigan is one of those offering ED for the first time this year. At the end of the day, ED has always been about, do you want to go there? Do you want this search to be over because that's your place that you really want? I think ED has become a strategy for getting in to the most selective place, whether you want to go there or not. And that, as Lisa, you read the book, the introduction has a student, William, who did ED at Columbia because it was the way to get into the most selective place on his list. He won that lottery and he hated it because, as he told me, there were all these things he never looked at during the college search because he was so focused on EDing somewhere to get in. Now, if you're EDing to your place that is a good fit for you and you've done this research and you really feel it, and by the way, you don't need to compare a bunch of financial aid offers in the spring, then go for it. But if you're only doing it because it's a strategy to get into that place so you can put that sticker on the back of your window, I'm not quite sure that's the reason to do it.
Okay. If students can't go tour in person, is it okay for them to reach out to professors and other people on campus with questions?
Yes, I mean, I think that there's no reason you as a prospective student cannot reach out to as many people on the campus. Don't be a pain about it. I mean, again, if there was admissions officers or other people who work at colleges and universities, I know exactly what notes I'm going to get tomorrow about this. I mean, they don't love it, but not everybody does it anyway. So I think that you have a chance to really connect with I would try to connect with some current students in your major if you can, either through your high school of alums that went to that college or if you connect with professors, ask them to connect you with some students. You might be able to do a little bit blindly on LinkedIn if you could find them or through other means. But the more that you could talk to people outside of the official channels about what it's really like, I think it's important. And then, of course, you could look at the Facebook groups, the Reddit groups, the Reddit threads, and things like that to get a little bit more unfiltered. Also, student newspaper. I know a number of people recommend looking at the student newspaper. Most of them are online now, so you can read them without visiting campus. Another great resource to figure out what's really going on.
Okay, that's a big help. Do you have any thoughts about what's going to happen with international students here? We have a number of people who are with us from outside of the United States.
Yes.
Um,
So we will know pretty soon. Applications, first of all, have leveled off. So applications at the undergraduate level have leveled off even before January. Second, visas were delayed. And that's what we don't really know. So what I'm hearing from a number of people that I've been talking to is they're more worried about graduate international students than undergraduate. Where that impacts undergraduate, by the way, TAs, different types of teaching assistants that might be teaching undergraduates, they might have trouble filling those spots if they don't have enough graduate students. Many of them their numbers are pretty good because undergraduates might have stayed. and not gone home over the summer, and so they didn't run into visa problems as a result. Visa interviews are back up and running, but I know that in some countries, there might be a month or plus, 2 month waiting list. And by the way, it takes a while now to go through these interviews. I was just overseas recently and talking to some people who do visa interviews, and a visa interview that might have used to only take a few minutes now takes 15 minutes or plus because they're doing social media checks. In addition to that, so all this is to say, there definitely will be fewer international students. We just really won't know until they either show up or don't show up on campus in a couple weeks.
Okay. Students often feel that they have to do something incredible. You've sat in the admissions rooms, you've heard those admissions conversations that happen among admissions officers. Students often feel they have to say or do something incredible in their high school experience to stand out from thousands of applicants that these colleges are getting. How true is that they really need to be in some way exceptional and different than their peers?
Again, where are they applying to? If they're applying to highly selected places, the number of applications, which have tripled, by the way, at the most selective colleges, the number of applications have tripled over the last 20 years, even though their enrollments have largely stayed the same. What does that mean? There's just many more applicants now, obviously, but there's probably many more applicants like you. And so that's why I think there's this feeling that I have to do something exceptional to be different than everybody else. And that is true. At many of these places, they are looking for something different. And I think what you have to really have a conversation about is, do I want to do all those things that are different and exceptional? And by the way, still not get in. And I think that's the important thing. Just because you do whatever these exceptional things are doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get in. And so I think the discussion that you need to have as a family is, if we're going to commit to doing, taking 12 APs, doing all these outside activities, and by the way, those are not that exceptional anymore, unfortunately. I'll never forget Christoph Gutentag, who was the former dean of admissions at Duke. He gave this quote, which is in the book. He said, "We used to say this wall of fives, meaning fives on the AP, top score on the AP, would get you in. And a wall, by the way, of fives would be 10 plus AP courses." First of all, a lot of high schools don't even offer 10 AP courses. So you have to take 10 AP courses, get fives on all of them. And he said that doesn't move the needle anymore at Duke. That to me says a lot. And so I said, well, what does move the needle? Right? Because if that doesn't move the needle, what does? And he said, kind of going outside, at least on the academic side, going outside the curriculum at your high school. So your high school is not good enough anymore. You have to take college courses. You have to really, you have to do, internships and research in high school, like all these things that show that you can get outside the curriculum. I'm sorry, Lisa, that's kind of ridiculous. I hate to say it. It's just why. It reminds me of Who Gets In and Why at Emory. Again, the opening anecdote in that book, where I sat in this room and they were trying to decide whether to keep a student in, some pre-med major. I can't remember. It must have been neuroscience, because the admissions officer said there is no evidence of neuroscience in this kid's application. An 18-year-old high school student. How the hell are they going to get some evidence of neuroscience? And again, this is the game. It's a game that we're playing. And I'm not telling you not to be part of it. You could be a player in it, but you can also play over on this other field a little bit as well and do both. And just say, you know what, we're going to take our chances and we're going to try to get into these highly selective places, but we're not going to put all of our energy and time into that. Because at the end of the day, it might not work out. You might not have a plan B as a result, but are you really going to be happier for it?
You also, as somebody whose kids have gone through that process, you get one shot at your family life and your children being teenagers together and them being home with you. And
You get one shot at high school.
yeah,
I mean, I loved high school personally. I
yeah.
really did. Probably why I was a B student. But but I loved it. And that's why, like, why can't we get back to that? And by the way, so then I'm going to say, well, people then will say, and by the way, this Saturday in the Wall Street Journal, it's supposed to run this Saturday in the Wall Street Journal, is an excerpt from the book that talks about, because I know the answer I will get from parents, but then they'll never get a job at McKinsey or whatever. So we have, and this graphic's going to run in the journal when this story comes out. See if I can find it easily. We looked at who lands where. It's a hard chart to read online, but this basically shows the side down here is selectivity. So the darkest group is the most selective colleges, the least selective colleges at the bottom. These are three companies that we picked that Lightcast did data on: General Motors, Microsoft, Morgan Stanley. So three different industries, all Fortune 50 companies. What this shows is there's flow from all of these colleges on the left side to all these companies on the right side. In other words, you're going to, first of all, if you go to a highly selective college, your chances of working with people who didn't go to selective colleges are going to be pretty high because there's so many more of them. You can get jobs anywhere because, as Frank Bruni has said, it's what you do, not where you go. And that is going to be most important.
We've only got a couple more minutes, so if you've got a question, make sure you put it in now. Someone's asking a question that I was hoping that we would touch on tonight. AI. How are colleges using AI in the admissions process? Is it already being used?
So many won't talk about this, but they're using it. Some schools are using it to figure out high school transcripts. There's 25,000 different high schools in the US. Many colleges get thousands and thousands of applicants from different high schools, and they have to like kind of recalculate GPAs, things like that. So they're using it a little bit on that front. They're using it in essay detection as well as trying to figure out, are there clues? I know the University of Miami has been doing this. They're looking at old essays from a couple of years ago, and running them through like a machine learning sequence to figure out, and then looking at those students who enrolled and how they're doing at the university to see, are there any clues we can get in the essay that tells us if these students will succeed at the college. So they're looking at essentially student success. But right now, I still think it's the early days. They're obviously using it in communications and things like that. But I do think we're coming to a day where there will be a lot more AI used in these offices.
Can we reverse the question? How can students use AI in their search process as a tool to help them? As you say, there's 2,500
Oh,
colleges.
I think they should. I think you should, have conversations with AI around different schools. Make sure you, by the way, even when I was doing the Dream School list, I was using AI to experiment with a couple of different things to find out stuff around schools. And by the way, there's a lot of incorrect information out there, so be very careful of that. But use it. I was with a group of provosts and vice presidents last night for a dinner. And the whole discussion was around the use of AI in college. They're going to be using it in college, right? Increasingly, faculty and colleges want them to use AI sometimes and not use it other times. There's a real big push right now for transparency in college around the use of AI, essentially in courses, right? So they want professors to say, okay, on this assignment, we're going to use AI and here's why. On this assignment, we're not going to use AI and here's why. So this really big transparency push so that students understand the right uses of AI, when it's good, when it can be used, and it's going to be used in the job market, and colleges and universities understand that.
There's two more admissions questions I think we're going to touch on, and then we're going to have to call it a night and let Jeff get on with other things he needs to do. One is about building a list.
Yeah.
Because of the difficulty in getting into so many schools, it's very hard for parents to know how many schools a student needs to apply to and how those schools should be allotted. Ones that they're more than likely to get into, ones that they may have a very slim chance of getting into. Do you have any thoughts about that?
So, applying to more schools and the same kinds of schools, because that's essentially what's happening now. If you don't have a balanced list, applying to more schools is not going to help you. 10 schools, three in one bucket, three in another bucket, three in another bucket, and then one to throw in addition to that works for most students. You don't need to apply to 15, 16, or 20. Some of the numbers I hear once in a while, but the key is the balance because most students don't have a balanced list as a result. Somebody mentioned in there, and which I think is a great idea, and I actually have just been testing it with the Dream School list, is using AI asking it, I'm interested in, Carnegie Mellon University. Tell me other colleges that are like it. And here's what I'm looking for. And AI is really good at that. In fact, we just used it. We're going to be putting out as we talk more about the Dream School list, we're going to be saying if you're looking at this college, consider these dream schools. That idea of kind of what I call the lookalike schools are really helpful. I think that's one way that AI can help. And by the way, that's one way you get to a balanced list because you get a sense of like schools that are like that school but are more accessible.
Terrific. Jeff, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for spending the time with us. Everybody, September 9th. Hope you can see it on my screen. Dream School's coming out. The list is in the back. And if you pre-order in advance, Maridel's just put all the links. There are some things you'll get.
Yes. Yeah. Make sure if you, no matter where you pre-order from, Amazon, your local bookstore, Barnes and Noble, whether you buy the audiobook, the ebook, or the hardcover, make sure you go to my website, jeffselingo.com / Dream School, but just go to the Dream School page. There's a form on there that you have to fill out to get these goodies, including, by the way, this guide. I highly recommend this because I think it's a really good list in here of things to do to put the work of the book immediately. And most of all, if you end up liking the book, please tell others about it because most people find out about books from other people. And the only way we're going to change this conversation, this is a collective action thing. We have to do this as a community.
Rachel saying where you're going to get the guide. If you buy
you get the
book,
guide immediately. As soon as you fill out that form, you'll get it emailed. I have a physical copy. It's not a physical document. It's a PDF. You can obviously print it out, but you'll
Isabel,
get it
yes, it could
emailed
be
to
the
you
ebook.
immediately. Yep.
Isabel, it could be the ebook as well.
Yeah, it could be the ebook. It could be the audiobook. You just have to do that proof of purchase on my website.
Terrific. And I can see people are telling us right now that they're pre-ordering as we speak. And you will also get an email from us with the recording and the link to do this as well.
Yes, and as Allison said, it's like Taylor Swift, any variant. I will not be singing any Taylor Swift songs.
Thank you, everybody, for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you, Jeff, so much for answering so many questions. We really appreciate
Well,
this
and
evening.
thank you to the Grown and Flowing community, and thank you, Lisa and Marydell, for hosting me tonight. I really appreciate it. And thank you all out there. We change this one community, one family at a time. So thank you. Have a good one.
Good night.
Thank you.